Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Flip the System US book launch event on Facebook Live. I'm here with Eric Crouch, who's going to be interviewing me in a minute. But before we get to that interview, let me just give you an overview of what we're going to be doing today, some of the people you're going to be meeting, and of course, with this book coming out after 2 weeks or after 2 years of work, there's some thank yous that I have to get to. So let me start with those first. First, I've got all of the teachers out there work in really difficult circumstances. I can say there has probably never been a tougher time to be a teacher than right now during the pandemic. But at the same time, I have never been prouder to be a member of the teaching profession, because the work that you are doing right now, you're keeping our students safe, you're keeping our communities healthy, and you're doing work to build our future in incredible ways. Couldn't be prouder. And this book that launched yesterday, Flip the System US, How Teachers Can Transform Education and Save Democracy. This book is for you. I hope that it gives you some inspiration to keep doing your work. And I hope that it lets you know just exactly how important your work is and how valuable you are. So my name is Michael Soskil. I am the editor of Flip the System US. As I mentioned before, I'm here with Eric Crouch. I have to give a thank you to the previous Flip the System editors. Flip the System US is the 4th book in the series. You're going to be meeting some of those editors in about a half hour. But the original Flip the System book in 2016 came out in the Netherlands. It was edited by Jelmer Evers and Renee Nijber. You're going to meet both of them soon. And it was transformational. It really shifted the landscape of how education was looked at around the world, because it was one of the first books that centered the teaching profession on teachers and made the case that our education system can't be healthy unless we are reaching into the professional teacher networks and making sure that our education decisions are based on teacher expertise. So you're going to hear from them. But then after that, there was a UK version and an Australian version that came out. And then, of course, the United States version launched yesterday, focused on the health of our democracy. In addition to my previous editors, of course, my wife has been incredibly supportive. I write about her in the dedication. She is not only supportive as a spouse, but she is an incredible teacher herself. She is a high school biology teacher. And as I mentioned in the book, when I think about teachers driving education policy, it is often her voice and voices of teachers like her that I imagine being elevated and driving the system that we have, because teachers that love their students the way that she does and are dedicated to the teaching profession like her, they are who we need to be listening to when we determine education policy. And finally, there are 32 incredible contributors to the book. This book would not have been possible without them. I wrote just one of the 22 chapters. The other 21 chapters are written by amazing teachers from across the United States, some of the world's leading education researchers, and each of them bringing their perspectives and their narratives to this piece of work. It wouldn't be possible without them. And you're going to hear from some of those contributors in about an hour at 11 o'clock. I should also mention, before I let Eric start interviewing me, that we are going to be giving away some awesome swag and prizes today. So if you have not registered yet, here's the web address. It's bit.ly/FTSUS for Flip the System US -swag. If you go ahead and register there, we'll enter your name into a drawing. I have a wheel of names ready to go on a second computer that will play some funk music and spin a wheel to choose some prize winners as we go forward. We're also going to be playing games with some of our guests to choose winners that way, so we'll have some fun with it. In addition, for those of you that have not purchased the book yet, or if you have purchased the book and you just want a discount on some other awesome books, I have gotten permission from my publisher, from Routledge. And by the way, I should definitely say a thank you to them also, because this wouldn't be possible without them. But I have gotten permission to give you a discount code. So 20% off any book on Routledge, including Flip the System, any of the Flip the System books. That code is IRK69. IRK69, you can use that on Routledge. And it's routledge.com for any of their books. In addition, last thing before I turn it over to Eric, if you'd like to join a free book club for anyone who has purchased Flip the System US before November 6th, so you can purchase today, you still have the rest of the week. I am running a free book club each week for 5 weeks. with the exception of Thanksgiving week. So we're going to take a week off. But each week we're going to focus on a different section of the book. There are 5 sections, and we'll be bringing in some of the contributors and chapter authors to discuss what they wrote about, to discuss some of the topics in there, and we can learn along with them. So I'll be running that book group. And if you want to register for that book group, again, it is absolutely free, and it is bit.ly/FTSUS for Flip the System US -book club. So if you go ahead and register there, the first 30 that register will be put into the book club, and we'll make some magic happen. So with all of that out of the way, Eric, go ahead and ask me whatever you want.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, let me start off by saying congratulations. I know we've had conversations in the past about this book, so I know this is some heart work that you've put into this, and I mean heart, because I know this means a lot to you. And I just want to say congratulations that it's finally here. And I want to start at the beginning. I want to start with the conversation with you and Yelmer. You wrote about it. You said it's something sparked your interest. I want to know, what was it in that conversation that led you to say, I need to make a book in this series?
Yeah. So I've been teaching for 23 years. And I think like any other teacher, early in my career, there were times where I was frustrated that some of the things I was being forced to do in my classroom didn't match what I knew what was best for kids. I think all of us have had that experience at one time or another. And around 2012, when I first started getting some attention as a teacher for some of the things I was doing in my classroom, it gave me a greater platform to advocate for what I knew was best for kids. And at that time, I started looking for ways to make people understand, to help people understand that if we don't listen to the teachers in the classroom, we're not going to be able to get decisions right. And that looked like different things. I started writing blog posts. I started a blog around that time. And I was trying to argue for a more student-centered, a more democratic process in schools. And that was getting some traction. But 2 things happened that led to this book directly. And one of them was starting the Pennsylvania Teachers Advisory Committee with Maury Cooper, and looking to really codify this work into some kind of system that will allow teachers to have input in policy decisions and drive some of the decisions in our state in Pennsylvania. But the other, as you mentioned, was meeting Yelmer. I met Yelmer, both of us were Global Teacher Prize finalists in 2015. We met each other in Dubai in 2016. And that's when I first learned about his book, the first Flip the System book that he edited with Renee. And what he did in that book was to bring together education researchers and teachers from all over the world to make the case that I was trying to make for all of those years. And what ended up happening is my mind started spinning. What would this look like if we were to apply it to the United States? And in the time while I was thinking about that, a UK version came out, an Australia version came out, really focusing on those systems. And Yelmer had approached me a couple times and said, "Aren't you ready to do a US book?" And I was, going through my time as Teacher of the Year, and I said, "Not yet, I can't do it now." But when the opportunity arose, and when I looked at the way that our education system was moving in the other direction under the current administration, I knew that it was time to do this. And so all of those things led to me finally saying yes about 2 years ago, finally starting to do the work about 18 months ago, and then the book that launched yesterday.
So when you sit down and you were busy, I remember this time in your life, it was very full calendar. When you sat down to make an outline of the different elements, where did you get the inspiration from? What were the things that you maybe had to table and say, okay, let me come back to this. Where are my core 5 things that I want to make this book about? Because obviously I know there's more things that you could probably write about, but those 5 stood out to you. So where did you get the inspiration for those? And when you sat down, what did that process look like?
Yeah, so the book is than being an author. And I certainly learned that early on. I had a book together. You have to submit to a publisher, what your outline looks like, and then they run it past some different teachers and buy the book and ask what, and that original outline was similar, but also very different than what we ended up with. And I'm blessed to have an amazing network of great teachers and great thinkers like you, right? And so I reached into that network, and Ginny Fercucci and our mutual friend Josh Parker were instrumental in the beginning in helping me kind of focus where we were. As a matter of fact, I remember sending a draft of the outline to Josh and him saying, like, all of these topics are great, but this is not cohesive. Like, this doesn't make any sense in the way you have it laid out, which you totally sounds like Josh, right? So through that process, it made me focus more and more. And what ended up happening is the book became more and more focused on the things that were most important for us right now. And I think if you look at our education system and you look at our society, I think all of us as teachers would believe that education is the answer to most of the problems in society. But we also have to own then that the problems in society are a result of the failing of our education system. So hyperpartisanship, polarization, the inability of people to be able to have nuanced, complex conversations with each other, the inability for people in rural areas to understand the lived experiences of people in urban areas and vice versa. All of those are problems in society because we haven't built the tools for kids when they were in our education system. And so this book really started to center on how do we make school equitable? Because if you're not providing a quality education for all children, you're not going to have a quality democracy for all people. And how do we build the kinds of values and skills in our students that will help them make our democracy healthy? And that's really how I settled on those 5 different areas in the book.
And so I'm sure, obviously, through the different authors, you saw the examples of these things already happening in schools, and that was kind of the motivator, I assume, to say, look, we can do this. It's already being done in these places, but we need to scale, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So one of the things I was very intentional about in the book when I reached out to the contributors is to make sure that not only was it research driven, because we want it to be academic in focus. We want to make sure that we are that we're research driven in how we're pushing for policy to be developed, but also that it was narrative driven at the same time. And so in almost all of the chapters, what you'll see is a combination of really strong research with actual examples of things that have happened in school, teachers that they've experienced in their classroom career, to exemplify some of the, because we know in the abstract, if you gets some research, whatever, it's not going to move them unless they can make a personal connection with it. It's the same thing we do in our classroom, right? And so chapters together with those narratives to make sure that we are to a reading the book, so they can see themselves in different situations that we're talking about in the education system, which will then make them want to institute change.
Do you feel like at all, just throwing this out there, do you feel like you kind of have assembled part of the Avengers here? Because when you look at the names on this, I can't help. I know you're a Disney guy. I'm a Disney guy. When I'm watching, it's like person after person, and you're like, wow, what? When you see the people in this book, I know one of the people I was excited, and you mentioned it earlier, was Josh, and Josh has not been published before in this capacity. And that's something I probably messaged him for the last 2 years as, hey man, looking forward to that book that you're going to write. And he's like, oh, I'm not working on it yet. And then when I found out he was a part of this, I was just so excited. I mean, how exciting is it? And I guess my question is, what is the hope for the book and for these authors and their parts of the book to be able to put this out into the public? What is the hope for this book as you are, you're right there on the edge with the teaching in the fourth industrial revolution was right on time. And now here we are at another pivotal moment in education where you've got the team assembled. They're ready.
Yeah. One of the reasons that this particular book, with the kind of focus that we came out of my time as teacher of the year. So when you're a state teacher, in these deep discussions about how do we make the system more equitable, how can we amplify, I was very aware in that space that not only did I have an incredible platform as a teacher of the year and a formal Global Teacher Prize finalist, and one of the authors of Teaching in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is now sold, I don't know, thousands of copies all over the world. Not only did I have that platform, but I'm also a straight, white, American middle-class male, right? Like I am almost, like I am demographic that you can come up with. And so how do I use my platform to elevate and amplify the right voices? And when I was putting this book together, I was very intent sure that I had representation of as many different oppressed groups, as many different demographics as I can in the book, not just to speak about equity issues, but to speak about all issues that we're talking about in the book, but also making sure that I had teachers who were excellent, who were absolutely the best at what they do, their classroom practices and some of the ways that they are leading in the education system. And then we combined that with some of the world's leading education researchers. I mean, Pasi Sahlberg, who helped design the Finnish education system, Andy Hargraves, who is, one of the top 20 education policy influencers in the United States, wrote chapters, so that we could bring that mesh of educational researcher, university level expertise and put them together in the same space. And I'm really proud, like you said, of the group that we put together. I can't imagine him listed among all of those other people that are in the book. And I'm thrilled that they.
That's too cool. So I guess the obvious question that's next is, and this line stood out to me in the book, was that, kind of the goal of education when we're at our best is that every student has the freedom to realize their potential. If we were to take that and move that over to the teacher and say, when you realize your potential, that's when they're going to realize theirs. Like when we move this from here to here, we're going to make a connection. So I guess when we talk about the rural teacher in Pennsylvania or Georgia to the teachers in the mountains of Nevada, how do we help them understand that not only do they have the ability to flip the system, but it's up to them to flip the system?
Yeah. So there's actually a chapter in the book that speaks directly to this, but there's also a lot that speaks to it tangentially and in different ways. But let me take a step back and talk about when we say a flip system, what we're talking about. So right now, the education system in the United States and most places in the world is very top down and very hierarchical. So the federal government tells the states what to do, and they use certain coercive levers to make them do it. And then the states tell districts what to do. Districts tell their administration tells teachers tell students, right? And at each level of that system, we're using different coercive levers to, whether it's grades, whether it's teacher evaluation, to make sure that people comply. And what we're talking about in a flip system is turning that on its head and starting from the bottom up, which is actually the subtitle to the first Flip the System book that Yelmer and Renee did. And starting with those in the system asking the rung below, what do you need to be successful? Right? So for us in the classroom, starting by saying to our students, what do you need to be successful in my classroom? And then demanding of principals that they ask the same question of us as teachers. What do you need to be successful in your classroom? And if we do that and develop a system based on support and inclusion and inspiration rather than coercion, that our system will be better. And of course, what that means is that teacher expertise is filtering into the policy decisions that are being made. But I think when you look at that model, it sounds idealistic and fantastic. And the first problem that people should recognize is that 87% of our teaching force here in the United States is white women. So if you include teacher voice into policy decisions and you have almost all white women who are explaining it, they're only seeing things from a white female perspective, right? Which is not a wrong perspective, but it's only one of many perspectives that need to be taken into account. And so the only way to make this work is to make sure that all teachers, regardless of their background, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their religion, regardless of their sexual orientation, feel welcome to teach in our schools and to fit into our staff and to make sure that they are included in our educational process. And if we do that, then students will feel more included as well, because we'll be able to take all of that different perspective and use it to make the best decisions that we can for our students. And so part of making sure that our school system is equitable for students is making sure that it's also equitable for teachers. And again, there's an amazing chapter that was put together by Michael Pena with about 7 different chapter authors, some of whom are going to join us at 11 o'clock, talking from different perspectives about how we can do that. What does that look like in our school system? So
really, it's a lead from the middle. They always talk about leadership up here, and kids are kind of down at the bottom, as you just mentioned, in the system, which is that it all trickles down to them, but we're kind of wedged in between.
Yeah, and so what I would say is the only stakeholders in an education system that can advocate for a wide variety of students and understand the practical implication of policy are teachers. There's no one else, right? So parents can advocate for their kids, and they should, but they only see their children, right? Students can advocate for themselves, and they should, and we should give them the opportunity to do so, but they only see things from their perspective, right? Teachers see this wide variety of students, and that's why teachers need to be driving the policy decisions. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to do the same thing in our classroom systems. And actually, Mari Cooper has a great chapter on this. How do you flip your classroom system? We need to do the same thing with our students, and we need to make sure that our classrooms are democratic. One of the things that I write about in the book is, we have these mission statements that say that, we want to develop good citizens and contributing members of society. You can't create democratic citizens in places where democracy is absent. If children go through 15 years of schooling and never have any democratic say in their classrooms or schools, we can't expect them at 18 to graduate and understand how to fit into a good democratic society. So we have a responsibility as teachers to flip our classroom systems and make sure we are asking our students, what do you need to be successful and how can I give it to you? And making sure that we're giving them choice and say in the things that we do in our classroom. Now, that doesn't mean that we allow for anarchy, right? That's not democracy, right? We are still the leaders of our classroom, and we need to facilitate the kind of environment that allows it to be inclusive. We have a leadership role in that classroom, but we have to make it more democratic and allow students to be part of that process in choosing, parts of the curriculum, how the curriculum is administered, in assessing whether or not we're being equitable in our practices. Students should be involved in all of those different decisions.
So if you're a let's say you're a second grade teacher, would you frame the starting line? If you were looking at this as like, I'm going to run this race and I know I'm going to run it the rest of my career. When they start, would you start with that question? What do you need to be successful?
Sure. And also the understanding that some of those students have never been asked that before. They've never had any kind of say in their education before. And so it's going to be really hard for them to answer. So you start with simple things where you can allow them to be part of the process. So instead of having a classroom rule that says, you're not allowed to speak unless your hand is in the air, you start with the conversation. Okay, let's set some classroom expectations. Let's set some norms for our classroom, right? Do you think it's a good idea for everyone to be speaking at the same time? Well, every second grade student is going to say, no, we can't learn that way, right? Okay, well, what are some rules that we can put into place that we all agree on that would make it easier, right? And you have that discussion, and through that discussion, you come to the same place, right? The kids are going to say, well, only one person should be speaking at a time. But now they've determined the rule instead of you. So instead of it being top down, now they're part of that process. And what's going to happen, even in a second grade classroom, is if you do that enough, you're going to be surprised that kids come up with ideas that you didn't think of, because they're seeing things through a learner's perspective, through a student's perspective, rather than you being top down. And if you keep giving them that voice and you keep looking for ways to include them, not only are you going to be a better teacher, but your students are going to end up learning more, and they're going to understand how to make better decisions. And I'll just add to that one more thing. If you have that democratic process in determining norms in your classroom, whether it's behavior norms or learning norms, and it goes wrong, let's say you make your kids come up with a terrible decision, right? They say everybody should be able to speak at the same time. That's an extreme example, right? What you're going to find is 2 weeks in, it doesn't work. And now, because it's democratic and not top down, you can say, all right, let's revisit these rules. Are they working? And if the answer is no, you can fix them democratically. Whereas if you instituted something top down, and we know this as teachers, because how many times has something been forced on us top down that we don't agree with and we know doesn't work, but we have no recourse to fix it. If we were part of that process, we could explain what's wrong and get it fixed. If you allow your students to be part of that process, they can explain what's wrong and be part of the solution in fixing it. And that's how you learn to make better decisions in a democracy, by actually learning from your mistakes and making better decisions in a democratic system, right?
Who would have thought?
Right. Yeah.
But it is interesting. I remember when we would do many years ago, the reading workshop. That was one of the best parts of the workshop model. When we would work into, like, what does it look like to be reading, right? And somebody got to do the bad example. Like, what would it look like if somebody wasn't doing it, just so that we could know what might someone be doing. And in first grade, because this is like first week of school and they're still trying to figure everything out, and we would be up throwing things around and doing this, and everybody would have their little moment. But in that, when we would come back and talk, they were able to identify why that doesn't work. Because if our goal is to learn how to read or to work on our reading, that's not going to allow us to do that. And so when everyone gave an example and we reinforced it, so you're right, it created a sense of agency and autonomy that kids were able to walk around with their head up a little higher because they could explain everything because they built it.
Right.
And I think that maybe the classroom teacher in the elementary school thinks that that's like a high school level debate conversation that kids could solve these problems. But in elementary school, that maybe they're not quite ready, that they still need me to tell them a lot of things, right? We're still in this world of the teacher is the keeper of all the information. And there's no way that kids could just, be guided to this. But
Right. And so, and I think you're doing a great job, and both of us are having a conversation about like why we need to flip our classrooms, right? So now if we take that and apply that to the broader system, right? Because our classrooms are a microcosm of what the system looks like, right? If it's too oppressive, too top down, then students are, being oppressed, and maybe they learn something, but, right? Same thing with the system, right? Teachers are at the bottom of that system that we talked about before, that unflipped, coercive, hierarchical system, right?
Right.
And if we don't allow teachers to have voice in the decisions that are being made in the same way, we end up with unintended consequences. That's really what we're talking about, right? In our classroom, if we don't give students any say, we end up with unintended consequences because we don't know what they're learning. We don't know what their opinions are. We don't know how it's impacting them. We don't know their home situation, whatever, right? Same thing if teachers don't have any say in the system, right? There's unintended consequences. And we, perfect example, No Child Left Behind, right? It was developed for all the right reasons. Right? I mean, the original bill was a bipartisan bill that looked at and said, hey, we have equity gaps in this country. We need to close them. If we just test the heck out of people, we'll be able to see where those gaps are and fix them, right? Now, every teacher in the country at that time was saying like, okay, you've identified the problem, but this is not the solution, right? But politicians didn't ask the teachers, so they put it in place anyway, and what do we end up with? Worse equity gaps, right? Teachers that were frustrated and ready to leave the profession, students who were stressed out of their minds over standardized testing, schools that were losing funding over, right? It was a disaster. And it was a disaster that could have been avoided if we just listened to the people who are at the intersection of policy and practice, if we just brought teachers in.
So as they're using the book as an entry point into this particular, maybe shifting gears as the way that teacher sees their role, how would you recommend they use the book to finding, let's say, their own group of Avengers, or maybe their own group of teachers that they can get that support from? I know you're a master at connections. I want this to be heard by the people.
Yeah. So this is probably the last question we have time for, and it's a perfect last question. Well, first, I would encourage people to join the book club, right? So bit.ly FTSUS-book club, right? Go there. We've got room for 30, and we can start building that network for you because you'll be in with other teachers that are looking, and other administrators and educators who are looking to do similar things, where we can have some great conversations and you can build that network. But beyond that, I believe that almost every one of the chapter authors is accessible on social media. Connect with them, right? Start building your network in that way. See who they follow. When they tweet things out and they're retweeting someone, look at what they're retweeting. It's probably along those same lines because, by the way, there's not consensus in the book. There's some places where people disagree, and that's great because that's democracy, right? So, but look at the people who are saying the things that you care about, right? And follow their networks and start building your tribe, your Avengers, to go and do that work. But also, look for spaces where these conversations are happening. And I would say, there's a great case that's made in the book for union renewal, right? So our education unions are places where you have teachers that are, that are built to get more teacher input into the system. And of course, they're in political spaces. That's okay, right? Teachers need to be political. And if your union isn't as democratic as you want it, flip that system, right? That's our role. Like, look at this, it's all about examining power structures, right? Examine who has the power, whether or not they're being democratic. And if it's not as democratic as you need it to be, then get involved and organize and get a group of people together that can push for change. That's what we've done with the book. We're inviting all of you to come along with us and to join this movement and to organize with us. And I really believe, there is no top-down system that has ever existed in the world that could withstand the pressure of a populace that was motivated to change it. And that's what we're really pushing for in education, right? For teachers to get involved and say, okay, we know what's best for our students. We need to organize and make sure that it happens.
Wow. Yeah. And I guess it kind of reminds me, and I'll wrap up here, but as kids, you like in our neighborhood, you played with whoever was on your street because of proximity, and that's what you had. And now we have this shared experience of being around all these incredible people now, with these walls that were imagined are actually just bricks that contained our classroom, but not the learning.
Yeah.
And so it's a great time to get out there. Mike, I appreciate you. I'm so proud and so happy for you, my man.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for waking up early on a Saturday to interview me and for being a part of this. It was awesome. And what perfect timing, because now we've got Renee and Yelmer and Lucy joining.
Take it away.
Eric, thanks so much.
Take care.
So welcome, Yelmer, Renee, and Lucy. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really
congrats, Mike.
All of you laid the groundwork for this work, and I don't know if you saw the beginning, but I gave you a big thank you early on. But it's absolutely, I absolutely mean it. I've from the moment I have my beat up copy of the original Flip the System here that I've gone through so many different times over the years. I couldn't wait to get the other books. I actually, the UK version I actually bought twice. I bought it on Kindle so I could read it on a plane, and then I needed a hard copy that I could outline. So I bought a paper copy. But all of that not only shaped my thinking, but codified in a way and brought things together in my mind of how this could look in the United States. So without your work, mine wouldn't be possible. Just thank you for that. So give me 1 second. I want to pull up some different questions that I have for you here. And also I want to give away some prizes.
That is so American, Mike.
Giving away the prizes?
I don't think we did that. Lucy, did you do that?
No, I don't think we gave away any prizes.
So not only do I have I have one signed copy of Flip the System I'm going to give away, but also over the course of the event, we've got some copies of Teaching in the Fourth Industrial Revolution that I ordered because I had all kinds of speaking events that I was supposed to go to, and then all of them got canceled, so I was doing them virtually. So we're going to get rid of some of those copies off my bookshelf. But also we've got some awesome Flip the System swag, right? So we've got the Flip the System red, white, and blue t-shirt, and we've got the black and white t-shirt, the more for our activists out there that are looking to make a statement. But we're going to start by giving away a face mask. And I have right over here, we've got a wheel of names.
I want one.
Right. So we have a wheel of names that I'm going to spin at random and find someone who is signed up for prizes. And we're going to give away our first prize. And that goes to Suzanne from Washington. So Suzanne from Washington, if you're watching, congratulations. You just won a face mask. I have your address, and we're going to send that to you. All right, so now that that's out of the way, Yelmer and Renee, why don't the first question I have for you is talk about your original vision for flipping the system in education and how your ideas on that have changed in the last 4 years as we've seen Brexit, the election of Donald Trump in the United States, more top-down systems that are being instituted in government and economics and education all over the world. Has anything changed in your view of, from when you put that book together?
I think the first, the initial answer should come from René. So he started it all. So I might be able to tackle the second bit a little bit more.
Good suggestion. Yeah. So the original idea for the first book was that teachers should have more to say about policy, about education policy. And we felt that in Holland, teachers had very little to say and had a very marginalized voice where it came to policy. And also in schools. And so basically our book was about strengthening the teacher voice. And that it's an actual voice that you should listen to, and it has meaningful things to say. And I think the book was partly symbolic in the sense that it was two teachers who made the book with a lot of other teachers, and we called it The Alternative. And it was basically about for teacher voice, but against privatization and of education and what was the other one? Test-based accountability. Yeah. And so that was the original idea for the book, and well, we tried to change a few things in our country, and then we made the international version because we felt that a lot of the issues we were dealing with were bigger in other countries, and we also wanted to change the global narrative on teacher voice. So that's where that book came from, and I'm glad it resounded with you and with Lucy, because we also felt that we could write a book about teachers in education policy, but for other countries we're just two weirdos from Holland, and so it's a lot stronger if you have teachers from your own country who make a book like this. So we're very pleased with all the spin-offs we had in Australia, Sweden, England, and also in America now. So we're very proud as well.
And Yelmer, anything that any changes in opinion or changes in
perspective? I think I mentioned that in the epilogue I wrote for your book. So when we started out writing this book, like the Dutch version was, I think it might not have been such a different world, but it looked like a different world. So it was more like pushing back against sort of like standard neoliberal reforms, privatization, new public management, sort of like that hierarchical input-outputs based sort of like educational systems where you become deprofessionalized, atomized, like teachers, individuals caught in the system, and being uneducational yourself as teachers. So that's sort of like, also, I think we're still in the stage, and I think we're on the cusp of sort of like Brexit at that time. But I think sort of a lot of things have accelerated, sort of like big tech, like illiberal, like the unfree movements around the world, like Orban, even within the European Union. And they affect teachers tremendously, also in the curriculum they can teach, but professional autonomy that they have. So it's a different kind of, and a more old-fashioned kind of narrowing, and it might be even more dangerous one, or it is a more dangerous one, I think. And it's being mixed up with that old sort of like system that we're already in. So it was already quite brittle. And you can see the test results, you can see the teacher shortages in the Netherlands, and it is increasing. And we're not sort of like in the stage where you have in the US and the UK, I think, politically speaking. But it's a precursor to where you are at the moment. And I think it asks a different kind of response. And so that's, for example, when I thought, well, if we just organize professionally and show how good we are, then everything will be all right. And show that we can be trusted, but that's a long way off. So that requires a different kind of response. So personally, I've been turned more and more towards unions and become involved in unions, and now sort of like elected in the board as a platform and a way to build, sort of like to protect those basic kind of things that you need. So so for me, it's been my view has evolved the last 10 years quite a bit, actually, especially also if you look back from the first Fit the System International book to your book, which I concur with the direction that you took. So yeah, definitely.
Well, good. That means a lot. I'm glad that you did. But you transitioned nicely into something that I wanted to ask Lucy. So you mentioned that the international version was very optimistic and idealistic in some ways, and I think the UK as an education system is probably, and things that have happened in government in the past couple of years are probably most similar to the US out of the countries that have had Flip the System books. How did the original book shape what you put together? And coming out of the UK version, what are some of the ways that you've seen positive change? And what are some of the areas that you still want to see people take the advice that you put together in the book?
Yeah, so I think the writing of the UK book came from a seizing of power, as all of these books did, right? From a moment of saying, who am I? I'm just this guy. I'm just, I'm just in the classroom. What have I got to say? No one wants to hear it. And if JL were here, he would offer the view that he'd always felt that way. Whereas, I've always been of the opinion that people should listen to me. So it's a nice counterbalance. But the seizing of power there was about, I think there's a kind of cycle you go on, like, oh, I could write a book, great, okay, so I could plan this narrative, I could be the person who says something. And then Flip isn't about that, of course. You go through the cycle of thinking that, and then you go, hang on, no, this is about platforming other people, and this is about, as you say, a coherent narrative of pluralism, which is really not about me at all, and never should be. And so kind of going through that cycle, you know, doing the book with JL, taking quite a long time to do that, and then coming out the other side with something that I don't think is a very cynical book. It would have been if I'd have edited it on my own, because I'm a much more cynical person than JL. He's the idealist here. It's as I say, a lovely balance. But I think, you know, we were giving speeches about this book and talking about this book at conferences and kind of feeling this seed of hope growing. And to be perfectly honest, you know, the situation is worse, right? So, you know, we had all this, I was really pushing the narrative that Yelmer had talked about in the intro, like, this is a perilous point in history, you know, we have to decide which way we're going to go, and, you know, things can't possibly get worse. Well, you know, they can. And they often must get worse before they get better. We all know this, right? But in terms of, you know, mathematically, I always think of this as, you know, we have points of inflection and we have local minima, and sometimes we can't tell the difference till we're out of them. And you need a perspective, you know, and historically you have to be kind of way out of it to get that sense. And I think, you know, we are facing interesting times in education where teachers had been tested so much that we thought, well, they must at some point start to resist. And now suddenly they're being tested even more in the UK to absolute breaking point. You know, we were at a point where the workforce were really on their knees, and then suddenly throwing all this extra stuff into the mix, plus the public opinion of them going down quite a lot, because, you know, I don't know your situation, but here in the UK, most of the media discourse has been teachers have done nothing during, you know, lockdown at all, even while they absolutely were, and then, you know, have not really made many concessions to teaching more safely, when of course the absolute reverse is true. So we've got that to contend with now as well. And so I think there is still hope for us, but we are plummeting still at this point, you know, and I think that at some point we have to reach a rock bottom where resistance will happen, and we have to get out, you know, as we say in our book, and I think this message has come out from all the books, we have to get out of blaming individuals for not being resilient enough before we get there. And actually in the UK, we're still there in that space quite a lot with teachers.
Yeah, there's definitely work to do. And I think that's why, you know, that fueled the need for my book here in the US. And I'm sure there'll be more books that are coming out after this that are lighting the way for teachers to organize and get involved in this kind of work. So I want to switch for the last 15 minutes. And I tried to think of a way, how can we talk about all of the things that are in all of the Flip the System books in a half hour, right? And it's just not possible. So we're going to play games because, you know, as you said, I'm very American, and we're going to give away prizes when we play the games. So I hope that all of you have a pencil and paper with you.
Sure.
We're going to play 2 rounds here, and each of you is going to be playing for a different person who's eligible to win prizes. So depending on who finishes first, second, or third, we'll be giving away some different things. And we're going to go through 2 rounds. So the first round of the game is going to be Name the Author. I'm going to give you a quote from one of the Flip the System books, and I'm going to give you 3 choices, and you're going to have to tell me who wrote it. Okay. In the second round, which is worth double points, I'm playing my for the Americans out there, I'm playing Wink Martindale. I'm going to be the game show host here. But in the second round, you're going to have to name the book. So I'm going to give you a chapter title, and you're going to have to name which of the 4 Flip the System books it was in, which of the 4 Routledge published books it's in. So we're
that's including the Australian one.
So, what's that?
That's including the Australian one.
Including Australia, yes,
Right.
yes. So, yep, right. Okay, so first, let's see who you're playing for. Okay, so we're going to spin the random wheel of names, play some funk music in the background. Oh, the music didn't play, but that's okay. So Dan from Massachusetts, Yelmer, that's who you're playing for. So Yelmer's playing for Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Okay. Lucy, you are playing.
On behalf of all women, apparently.
Yes, Jill from Washington.
Hey.
Okay. And Renee, you're playing for Michael from Washington.
All right, Michael, we got this.
All right, so first question. Okay, here's the quote, and you're gonna have to tell me, I'll give you 3 choices. The problem with test-based accountability is not that students, teachers, and schools are held accountable per se, but rather the way accountability mechanisms affect teachers' work and students studying in school. So I'm going to read it one more time for you. The problem with test-based accountability is not that students, teachers, and schools are held accountable per se, but rather the way accountability mechanisms affect teachers' work and students studying in school. So here are your three choices. Was that Elisa Guerra, Pasi Sahlberg, or Renee Nyber? So now, Renee, if it was you and you get this wrong, that would be it would look really bad. So I'm not saying it was, but all right, are you ready? Okay, Yelmer.
I need to hold it up.
Oh, you can, or you just tell me, yeah, whatever. You can hold it
Yeah,
up.
I think it was Renee, but you know, I could be completely wrong.
Okay, Renee, what do you think?
I think with me.
Okay, and Lucy, who do you think?
I thought it was Pasi, but now I'm changing my mind, obviously.
No, you should not change your mind. It was Pasi. So
Renee.
all right, so Lucy gets the first
You
point.
know your own writing.
I also should get an extra point because I wrote that down before you gave me the options.
Oh no, okay, good. All right, so we'll see if we need a tiebreaker, we're going to count that as the
I'm
tiebreaker.
thinking all of the above. You know, that's sort of like the.
All right, second quote. Engagement, identity, and well-being are the new front line of educational improvement. Engagement, identity, and well-being are the new front line of educational improvement. Was that David Weston, Gareth Alcott, or Andy Hargreaves?
All right. Mic drop.
Ready? Everyone ready? Yeah. All right, Lucy, you go first. Go ahead.
I think it was Andy.
Andy, okay. Renee?
Andy.
Yelmer?
Yeah, I went for Andy as well.
Okay, it was Andy Hargreaves. That's correct. Everybody gets a point there. All right, so Lucy's winning 2-1 right now. Okay, third quote. In many countries, teachers are under pressure with increasing workloads, lower pay, increasing attrition rates, and deprofessionalization. In many countries, teachers are under pressure with increasing workloads, lower pay, increasing attrition rates, and deprofessionalization. Was that Ray Snape, Yelmer Evers, or Russ Hall? Okay, everyone ready? Yelmer, what do you think?
Well, it sounds like a vintage Yelmer Evers quote, so I'm going to go for myself.
So you're thinking it was you. All right, Renee, what do you
I
think?
don't know. Again, all of the above, but I think it was me.
What do you think, Renee?
It sounds like Yelmer, so I think
Yelmer, okay. Lucy?
Am I the only one that thinks it's crazy that you can't remember whether you've written things?
No, it happens to me all the time.
It would never happen to me. It's like not recognizing my own children.
I definitely said something like really similar. So
I've got Ross Hall.
Okay, no, it was Yelmer. Okay,
Oh.
so we're tied up. Everybody with 2 points. That tiebreaker point might come in handy, Lucy. All right, so we're going to do one more before we get to round 2. Okay. So, in recent years, teachers and others who work in education have been subjected to unprecedented degrees of control and intervention. In recent years, teachers and others who work in education have been subjected to unprecedented degrees of control and intervention. Was that Howard Stevenson, Sean Slade, or Lucy Rycroft Smith? See, now after that last statement, Lucy, that you would never forget anything that you wrote.
Well,
It was you're on the hook here.
The problem here is that stuff that has my name on it might well be JL
Yeah.
and vice versa.
All right, is everyone ready? Okay, Renee, you go first this time. Who do you think?
I believe it's Howard. Howard Stevenson, yeah.
Lucy?
I've got Howard as well.
Yelmer?
yep, me too.
Okay, that is correct. Yes, it was Howard Stevenson.
Genuinely, I wouldn't say others like that, to be fair. So I did know it wasn't me.
All right, so going into the second round, everyone has 3 points. Okay, so all right, so all of these next, we have 5 different book chapters, and each one of these is worth 2 points, so the points are double. All right, and by the way, this includes the U.S. book. Now we're including that. I didn't put the quotes from the U.S. book because I knew that not everyone had read it. But since you've read the other ones, if you recognize a chapter title that wasn't in the other books, then you know it's got to be U.S. Right? All right, so first chapter. A culture of trust, key practices of compelling leadership. So your choices are US, Australia, the original, or the UK. Okay, so a culture of trust, key practices of compelling leadership. Yelmer, what do you think?
It was the UK, but could be wrong.
Okay. Renee?
Australia.
Okay. Lucy?
Australia.
Ah.
It was Australia. That is correct. All right. So.
That has Deb all over it.
All right. Next chapter title. Teaching is a political profession, stepping into the arena. Teaching is a political profession, stepping into the arena. Okay, Lucy, what do you think?
US.
US. Okay, Renee?
US.
Okay. Yelmer?
Yep.
Okay, that is correct. That chapter was written by Melissa Tomlinson in the US version. By the way, the first chapter title that we mentioned was Australia. That was Paul Browning. So we should give him a shout out for that chapter title. Yes, so everybody's got 2 points there, meaning that right now, Renee and Lucy, you have 7 points each. Yelmer, you are in last place with 5. All right.
I mean, last is a bit unfair.
I was just
He's
because I
second.
know Yelmer so well, I was just needling a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he'll catch up. We'll see.
Spin it a little bit. Yeah.
I'm American. I'm harsh. What can I say? All right. Third chapter title. Empowering teachers to empower young people to live for the common good. Empowering teachers to empower young people to live for the common good. Okay, Yelmer.
Yeah, sorry, I'm
Still thinking? That's right. Take your time.
yeah.
I should have the like game show music queued up. Right?
yeah. I think it's probably the US. It's Australia or US, but yeah.
Which
I think I'll go for US.
US. Okay. Lucy.
UK.
Okay. Renee.
It's UK.
US.
US. No, it was the UK version. That is correct. Obviously, Lucy would know, right? So that's yeah. Okay. All right. So Lucy out in
not my
front.
day.
I feel like it's showing that you two haven't paid close enough attention to this book, guys. I'm going to set you some homework.
True.
All right. Second to last chapter title. So Yelmer, if you're gonna catch up here, you need to get this one right. Just a little bit of pressure on you here. Okay. All right. Teacher leadership, a reinvented teaching profession. Teacher leadership, a reinvented teaching profession. Okay, Renee, what do you think?
Australia.
Australia, okay. Lucy?
OG.
Okay. Yelmer?
That's the original one. I think it's by.
It is the original, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So
It's
Yelmer
Barnett Berry and Noah. And
yes,
Rachel.
it was Barnett, Noah, and Rachel Evans. That is correct. Okay, so Lucy, you have 9. Yelmer and Renee both with 7. Okay, last chapter title. Immigrant and refugee education, strengthening our communities. Immigrant and refugee education, strengthening our communities. Okay, Lucy, what do you think?
It really could have been all of them, but I'm going US.
US, okay, Renee?
US.
And Yelmer?
Yeah, I think so. US. Yeah.
US, yes, it's chapter
Yeah.
by former US National Teacher of the Year, Mandy Manning. So that is correct. So we have first place, Lucy. So that means that Jill is
Yay, Jill.
prize. Yes. So Jill is getting a signed copy of Flip the System US. So you'd be signed by me as the editor. If you want the other people to sign it, you have to go around the country and find them. Because I don't have a signed copy from all of them.
Maybe wait for a bit.
Second and third place are still up for grabs. We have a tie there, so we're going to play a tiebreaker round. Okay, so for Yelmer and Renee. And if it's still tied after this, we'll flip a coin or something. So I have one more quote. Okay. And this one is, for me, the central purpose of education is the betterment of humanity. Okay, so that's the quote. I'm going to give you 3 possibilities. The central purpose of education is the betterment of humanity. Is that Carol Cambrell, Geert Biesta, or Deb Nedelicki? Okay, Renee, you want to guess first?
I guess it's the third one, but yeah.
Okay, Jelmer?
Yeah, I think so too. That doesn't sound like the way Gert would write it up. So I agree.
No, it was Carol Campbell.
Oh, really? Huh? Oh.
So we are going to flip. Actually, we're going to spin a wheel. Let's see. Let me spin.
Oh, damn. Shit, I need to get the door. Sorry.
Second place is Dan from Massachusetts. So that means
Hey. Sorry. I'm back in.
Dan's getting the t-shirt, and that means third place is Michael from Washington. Michael's getting a signed copy of Teaching in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So that was fun. Did you guys have some fun with it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good.
Good job. Good job.
By Lucy, which is always fun.
So we have about 5 minutes before we bring in some of the other Flip the System US contributors, and we have some fun with them. And by the way, we're playing the match game with them, and that's going to be that. For those of you that are watching online, we got some great questions for them. So hang on and stay with us. But parting words from each of you. Where do you see the Flip the System movement going forward? And how would you encourage teachers to get involved, not just by reading the book, but in pushing for this kind of reform to happen in their education systems, not just in the US or the UK or in the Netherlands or in Australia, but around the world? So Lucy, I'm going to give you first crack at that.
Thank you. I mean, it's increasingly obvious to me that, as I said, resistance is the way forward, and collective resistance. And I think that's the message that we've always had, really. But I think it's the times we're in at the moment are suggesting that it's not just the democracy of education and to be honest, democracy full stop that's breaking apart. Actually, lots of the ways in which we respond to each other on a personal level are becoming so political that falling apart is the default right now. And so, you know, there's a sense in which that kind of isolation, that breaking apart is terrifying, you know, upsetting, but also totally needed. And, you know, you speak to anybody who actually believes in feminism, believes in civil rights, they'll tell you this is crucial. And so much as it feels terrible and frightening, it's such a necessary part of rebuilding and reimagining the fabric of what we're made of, you know, in education, that it's something we all have to get comfortable with, right? And to be fair, there are, you know, people on this planet who have had to be comfortable with this their whole life. They don't get a choice. They've been broken apart all the time. Their personal life has been political their whole life. And, you know, as you kind of said at the beginning, many of us are just beginning to get into this process now because we've been privileged enough that we didn't have to. All of humanity is now, you know, getting involved, and I think that's the right choice. So for me, it is hopeful, and you know, I'm delighted that you brought out this book. I'm delighted you brought it out this week. Yeah, you.
well, that was to be fair. When I had conversations with Lauren Davis, who was my publisher at Routledge, I told her, if I'm doing this, what is the cutoff date? I want it out before the election. So that was
Good job, you.
On our part. yeah. So Renee, what would you say?
Yeah, so I think the future, we need to focus more on collective action, like you know, teachers need to unionize. I think unions are a big part of being a good democracy. And you know, if you want to counterbalance the forces at work right now, then you, as teachers, we have to unionize and you know and be a collective and stand for what we think is a good education.
And Jelmer, last word. No, you're muted.
I think Lucy said it perfectly. And, you know, we come from a very privileged time and place, us at least in the West. And a lot of people haven't ever been in that kind of space. I've never taught in that kind of space, and there are a lot of people still, and it's reversing. So for me, you know, I read a speech by Margaret Haley in 1904. She was president of the Chicago Teachers Union, I think, and also one of the founders of the American Federation of Teachers. and she already sort of like said it perfectly. You could copy that speech one-on-one to right now. John Dewey, didn't just write on education. He was also like a big proponent of teachers unionizing and organizing. And again, those, I don't know who said, I think maybe one of us said it, those spaces need to be flipped as well. So it's all the spaces that we are in that we need to do that. But it's if you look back on history, there are so many points of inspiration where people under much more difficult circumstances than us managed to overcome those really difficult times and horrible times sometimes. And I think what they did serves as an example and as a sort of like something that we need to strive for as well. And so I'm always an optimistic person, and I still think this time asks something of us, and most of us will rise up to the occasion.
Well said. And Jelmer, you being optimistic is one of the reasons why I love you, one of the reasons why we're friends. Jelmer, Lucy, and Renee, thank you so much for taking some time today, this afternoon. I know it's afternoon for you, morning for me. But more importantly, thank you for laying the groundwork for the book that I was able to put together with the incredible contributors that you now see on your screen with you. Your work was instrumental, and hopefully the collective work that we're doing to flip the system all around the world can lead to some real positive change. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
And with that, welcome to the people who are the real stars of the book that came out, my Flip the System contributors. Thank you so much for being here today, and a big congratulations. I got to read your work months ago, but now everybody gets to read your work, and I am so excited about that. You're all muted. You can come off mute if you want, unless you've got some noise in the background. Yeah.
No, I'm so excited. Just reading everybody else's chapters and everybody else's contributions. It's just been so cool.
Yeah. So we're gonna start with a little roundtable discussion. I don't know if you were watching, but we did kind of the same thing with the Flip the System editors before. Talked a little bit about their books. I'm gonna allow you each to share a little bit about your chapters. But then we're gonna dive into some games where we're gonna give away some prizes. And since we are in this group, we're all Americans, we're all dealing with the pandemic and education during the pandemic in the United States. We are gonna play, I'm gonna do my best wink Martindale, and we're gonna play the match game for some prizes. And I've got some great questions that I thought up this morning and last night with the help of my wife. And we'll see if you can match answers, to give away some fabulous prizes. So let's start. I'm just going to go around and because there's so many of us and not a lot of time, just in like 2 or 3 minutes, give your impressions of your chapter, a little bit about what you wrote about, and what you hope, the change that you hope comes out of the chapter that you wrote. So Winter, you're top left corner of my screen, so I'm going to give you a first shot.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I wrote about my own narrative, my own experience in school. I have a visual impairment. I was serviced under an IEP. My mom has a history of blindness. My dad is partially sighted. They both went to state schools and then were removed from those state schools by their parents and then put back into their local public setting due to not so positive an experience. And their experience in education shaped the way that they advocated for me and the access that I was able to have because I remained within my local LEAs and leveraging that access, leveraging that inclusion. I was mainstream, so I wasn't necessarily separated like some students are. And I was probably the forefront of education where mainstreaming was part of the culture that was being implemented. The separation and exclusion was necessarily being faded away. And I wrote about that, and I wrote about how we need to be intentional in our practices, how we need to use an applied behavior analytic perspective in order to understand where behaviors are coming from, the cultural application of them, the understanding that everybody has a different lens that they're looking through. And if we're only looking through our own lens, that we're not seeing everything and we're not understanding everything. So therefore, we're not teaching to everyone.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that all of you did so well in your chapters, and Winter talked about it a little bit, is using your own personal narrative to exemplify some of the research that's in the book and some of the change that we know needs to happen. So Winter, thank you for your incredible contribution and for being willing to share your narrative. Beth.
Sure. We'll see if my Wi-Fi holds up this morning. So I had the honor of co-authoring a chapter with the incomparable Kelly D. Holstein. We wrote on the active trauma on our youth. Yes, yes. I'll give that for Kelly. Miss her very much this morning. We had reflected, Kelly and I, on how as a nation, often using these buzzwords, and trauma in the US has been one of those in the past few years, but it's not a buzzword when it comes to the impact on our educational systems. Much to what you spoke to earlier, Michael, with the breakdown many of our democratic systems and functionings, not just over the past few years, but really in the pattern of our educational system as a whole, we are seeing even more manifestations and conversations surrounding children's traumatic responses. And so in the chapter, we took the time to look through a little bit of the brain science and what happens within children as they're developing and they experience things that no human should have to. But we also took a moment to let Kelly share a lot of her story. It's an incredibly powerful chapter. I have a chance to read all of you all wrote yet, but I would encourage everyone to take a moment and to really dig into what Kelly has to share. And we also advocate for making sure that teacher voice is at the table and creating a just system so that we are not leading to futures of incarceration in particular for our young people who have experienced a lot of trauma.
Yeah. For when all of you out there, when you get to Beth and Kelly's chapter, they do an amazing job of kind of tag teaming that, where Kelly will start with a narrative and then Beth will give like the neuroscience context to it and explain some of the reasons how it applies to our kids in school. So again, it's that beautiful blend of narrative and research in there. Lindsay, Dr. Lindsay Jensen, as of yesterday.
Don't make me cry. Well, first off, I'm really just sitting here drinking my coffee going, what am I doing here with these incredible people? Like, I just love you all so much, admire you all so much, follow you from afar, and I'm just so honored to be a part of this project with everyone. My chapter talks about closing the rural opportunity gap. And so as someone who lives in central rural Illinois, I'm really passionate about advocating for equity in rural spaces, and that in no way is intended to negate the equitable outcomes for urban communities and cities and all of that. But my students, I feel at times they don't have the same, opportunities and the same worldview as students in other places, right? When rural students, it really is a place of isolation. And at times that's dangerous because isolation, as we know, can breed fear and stagnation of the unknown, right? And so I think it's so important for teachers to be conscientious of this and to do everything in our power to broaden the worldview of our rural students. But another thing that I wrote about was the fact that a lot of my rural students, a lot of kids in rural areas, they experience this, their education is delivered from a lot of first and second and third year teachers, right? And that's not to say that first and second and third year teachers aren't great, but think back to yourself as a first, second, or third year teacher and how much you've evolved, right? Since then, I think back on my first year to things that I did and I'm just horrified, right? But this is problematic for students because if our rural kids are consistently having first and second and third year teachers in this revolving door of first and second and third year teachers, which is due to the fact that they often move from rural communities. Rural communities serve as a stepping stone to the, I always say, the Napervilles of the world that are higher paying districts with higher property taxes. That's problematic for our kids. And if that is their educational experience, and this is a really common thing in rural communities. Additionally, and then I'll wrap up and move on to the next incredible human on this call. I link a lot of our rural communities as well. As you mentioned earlier, Michael, teachers who look like me, we are a dime a dozen and we exist in rural communities. And part of my chapter talks about how we know that it's so important for students of color to see teachers of color, but it's equally important in rural communities for white students to see teachers of color. And so I wrote about that, and am just trying to bring some awareness to the experiences of my students in rural communities.
Yeah, and right from the beginning, when I first started thinking about how this book was going to be put together, and I knew that have a healthy democracy, there had to be an equity and inclusion focus in this book. But right from the beginning, teaching in a rural area myself, I knew that we had to make sure that there were a diversity of perspectives on what equity meant, and that one would be an important one. And thank you, Lindsay, for doing it so well. Mari, I guess you're the next incredible human, as Lindsay says.
Well, just to follow Dr. Lindsay is fantastic. I actually grew up very close to her school district across the border in Indiana, and central rural Indiana. So it speaks very much to my growing up. I wanted to start, Mike, by saying how amazed I am at this accomplishment for you and how important this work is in education in the United States. So as people talked about, Eric talked earlier about your ability to connect people and bring people together. And I think that goes horizontally and vertically. And I think that's critically important. So it's one thing to bring together teachers who we all have met when as you get elevated within which award did you win or how have you been recognized as a teacher, but really being able to bring that back to teachers who are equally as great, we all know, as we are, but might not have gotten the recognition. And so I applaud you for creating a ladder for all of that to happen. I think that's hugely important. And I think that we need this now more than ever. So congratulations, my friend. I am so proud of you. And at some point we will be able to be in the same room and I will get you a really nice single malt scotch. So my chapter was kind of with that same idea of systems, right? So my chapter, so I am obsessed with that idea of connecting that horizontal and vertical. And so my parents are both historians, and I grew up thinking very much about what is education's place within a democracy. And so I feel that daily the responsibility of creating an informed citizenry. And having grown up in rural Indiana, I do know the struggles that happen when you are in a smaller community with a different sense of resources. But I also think it's equally as important now living in urban Pittsburgh to be able to connect the experiences of urban students with rural students and with suburban students to have these conversations. So when I started to write, and we talked about all sorts of different chapters for me to write. It was like every week there was a different take. But I think for me, but the passion always comes to my students and also to the teachers who are boots on the ground doing this every day, working to try to create opportunities for their students, whatever their situation is in their classroom. So I wanted to give a primer to how do you do that? Because my students staged a revolution right when I was being told that I was a phenomenal teacher. And I wanted to connect these big sort of 5,000-mile ideas that we all are discussing and having with what does that look like daily in a classroom? And how scary is that to do? So it's really great to sit down and say, let's give our students voice. But if we've been trained in the classrooms to constantly be, we talk about, Mike hates the word instruction. We've been taught to, and he hates the word management. So classroom management and instruction, if you turn that into classroom environment and empowerment, that's a frightening idea because we haven't been trained in how to do that. So I wanted to give a primer to how to do that, why to do that, what that looks like, and that's my chapter.
Yeah. And Mari mentioned that she and I had different conversations about what her chapter might look like. And one of her original ideas, one of the things that I approached her with and wanted to ask her to write was the importance of arts education in democracy. And one of the things I love about the chapter, she ended up writing something different. But one of the things I loved about your chapter, Mari, is that you never mention the importance of arts in a democracy, but because of the way your chapter is structured, it illustrates exactly why the arts are so important in a democracy. So you ended up accomplishing that anyway, while doing something equally as amazing, talking about how teachers can do this in their classroom.
The arts are critical in a democracy. I want to be clear about that.
So Ginny, talk about your chapter.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. It's so good to see everyone. Like Lindsay, this is a little crazy because I've just admired all of you. And Mike, I just sort of began right in those fledgling stages when you were thinking about this and the conversations that we had. And so just watching you get to this place and this book is out and we are all going to be sharing it. And, people have already said like, oh my gosh, I'm buying this. Like I got emails last night from folks who already read it. So I just am super hyped for you and for all the voices that are being centered in this text. Speaking of centering voices, right? I know, and those of you that know me know that I cry all the time. So here it goes, right? Because when I talk about kids, I just get emotional. But my chapter is very much about, sort of how I, as a human, and I really want to be careful there because I think that really good teachers, it's not work, right? It's part of our person. It's part of who we are. It's the air we breathe. Like the human I am is a result of my relationships with young people. Like I am certain of that. And the only reason I have been, graced to have those relationships is because I listened. I listened to the kids because their voices were centered in my room. And so the real rock stars of my chapter are not here. I co-authored my chapter with two students. So Carly Sondergren and Kristen Nichols wrote the chapter with me. And it started as a research project. They both wrote research papers in a dual enrollment composition class that I teach. And they both took on the impact of privilege, specifically racial privilege, in their experience in schools. And Carly writes about how, as a valedictorian of our high school, she recognizes that the system was built for her. And it doesn't deny the amount of effort and work, right, that she put in every single day to be successful in an academic space. But like, she knows the system was built for her, and she acknowledges it and calls for action. Kristen likewise learned to navigate in a system that put up barrier after barrier after barrier for her. And, one of the most profound moments for me, and it's a quote that Kristen had used in class and then uses in the text, is that she learned at a very young age that she had to leave her Blackness at home and, code switch essentially and lose a huge part of her identity in order to be successful in school, which translated into a lot of silence. So while she participated and got straight A's and kicked butt, she just wasn't self and she wasn't celebrated. And that took away, that just took away, period, right? The list of what it took away is lengthy. So this chapter is profoundly important to me because two young people who speak truth speak it from a level of awareness that I think all teachers will be impacted by. And I am just like honored to now realize that when I go into a classroom, my whiteness is an impacting factor in that space. And that if I am intentional in recognizing that, and if I am intentional acknowledging my privilege, and making sure that youth are challenged and given a space of comfort and rigor, then we can build a real community. And I think as we talk about democracy and liberation and freedom, we have to build intentional communities in our classrooms where kids where young people and teachers and colleagues respect each other's differences, celebrate our differences, acknowledge our similarities, and just have a sincere connection. And through connection, we grow community, and through community, we grow empathy, and through empathy, we can then liberate. So that's what my chapter focuses on.
And for those of you watching, yeah, phenomenal. The chapter is amazing. And for those of you that are out there watching, there was probably nobody who was more influential in putting the outline of this book together than Ginny. She was right there in the beginning helping me do that. And one of the things that she said to me over and over again, and I remember one conversation, I was in the car talking with Ginny as I was driving back from Harrisburg from some kind of policy meeting, and I green, but the conversation was so important, I was pushing through. And I remember Ginny telling me, you cannot put this book together and make the case that you're making without student voice in it. You have to have students in the book. Student voice comes through in Ginny's chapter, but Estella Awima Church, who has a chapter, didn't directly write with students, but actually her chapter is about a student focus group in Los Angeles, where she was intentional about bringing all kinds of different voices to the table to ask students, how can we get you civically engaged? What does that need to look like in your classroom? And through both of those chapters, I think both of them are critical in making the case of what our education system needs to look like in order for our democracy to be healthy. And so with that, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you because I think it segues nicely.
I was thinking, you're really not going to have me go after Ginny, are you? Like, we can just wrap it up at that point. We're all good. For me, when we first started talking, it was really just a couple months after Kenny's book had come out last year. And the term anti-racist had not really become kind of an in vogue term yet, and we were still dealing with equity in terms of how that works in education, what that looks like, what is equity in education, and then we have this burgeoning idea of what an anti-racist education system looks like. And so when we were putting together the authors for this chapter, and to say, contribute what that looks like through your eyes, we hadn't had the 2020 push of Black Lives Matter, and the things that we have seen really come to fruition this year. And I keep thinking as I'm looking at this, like how prescient this chapter was, in terms of where we're at a year later. Winter was talking about her experiences as an educator of color, and to think about the ways in which our identities enter the classroom. When we had asked Carlos to write his piece, right? Like what that looks like for him when he comes into the classroom, and how, right, we're beginning to see how our identities are a piece of what we're teaching our students, right? And whether or not we do it with an intentionality, and whether or not we're recognizing this. And then how does that look when we discuss what the system is doing, right? That there are rules and policies and regulations that are really meant to oppress us. And that is, that's rough, right? As an educator of color. And Melissa talks about that kind of in her piece, and what that looks like in terms of being that checkbox teacher, right? And how do we move past that and reclaim that? And I know Al Hassan talks about that in his piece as well, to say, now that we're bringing this in and we recognize this, what does that look like? And how do we begin to do that with a focus to say, as that educator of color? And, and not only are we talking about that, but when we look at marginalized and oppressed identities, right, that we can move past then educators of color, we're also looking at educators of sexual and gender identities, right? And what does that look like when we really begin to branch out and think about the ways in which the system has oppressed us as educators, right, across the board now. And Jill's piece does a great job of taking a look at that. I had put in there, like, I am an anti-racist educator, and I thought at the time, oh my God, like people are gonna have no idea what that means. And I love where we are at in this conversation, that we're continually pushing forward with this work, and to say, when we are looking at this system, right, how will this system begin to incorporate the views and visions and needs of us in terms of historically marginalized and oppressed teachers? And kudos to you, and thank you so much for your work in putting this together. Congratulations to you to all of us as well, and really beginning to, or not beginning to, but continuing to, I think is probably a better way of saying it, push that conversation forward, and really bring that to the forefront of educational policy today.
Yeah, well, thank you for those words, Michael, but really congratulations to all of you, because as I mentioned in the beginning, having other people read your chapters, I'm so excited for that. I've known what's in the book for a while, but other people don't. There's only probably about 5 people that have read all of the chapters so far, so getting other people to read your work is great. And Michael's chapter is a phenomenal microcosm of the book as a whole, right? So in the book, I tried to bring together different diverse voices to make the case for a flipped education system. And Michael in his chapter brought together diverse voices to tell this story of how we can support teachers from all different backgrounds in the classroom and in our schools to allow that system flipping to happen. And that's just, you know, from Winter's contribution to all of the others that are in there, it's just an amazing, it's amazing look from different lenses at what that means in education. Amanda.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I really appreciate Jameson. So T. Jameson Brewer and I co-authored a chapter for this book, and it is such an honor to be able to do that with you all and to be part of this. Michael, I love your t-shirt. Your Teaching is Political t-shirt. Our chapter, Jameson and I are both scholars in educational policy and politics, and we focus on areas around justice, privatization, power, and how the choices that are made at policy levels affect schools on the ground. So Jameson is the lead author in this chapter, and we had a really nice time writing it. We both come from a teaching positionality. We're both teachers, and so we talk in this chapter about how, you know, the choices that we make for our schools in terms of school choice policies, or in terms of like market-based systems or competitive-based systems, and testing and grading standards, and how our, you know, state report cards pit our schools against one another, how all of these things have an impact on whether we get closer to equitable schools or further away. And so we like to think about, in the work that we do now with the teachers that we're working with and in our ed leadership programs and everything, you know, like, why do politics matter for us on the ground? And why is, you know, teaching political in our classroom? And you all, of course, know this and are doing that work as it is. And so for us, we think about in the chapter what we've done and what different states do to achieve, to kind of like speak about equity, or to speak about the state of our public schools, or to speak negatively about. And we look at like the local politics, the state politics, the federal politics, and some of what gets said about our schools. So, you know, we know that in a market, and when we have a market-based competitive system, there are winners and losers. And we just really try to challenge that discourse and say, is this really what we want for our public schools? Is this what we want for our public spaces? Is this what public school means for our common good? And what are we doing? And so this pandemic has really highlighted in so many ways, like, what are we doing? What's working and what's not for our students emotionally, socially? Really, are some of these grades really what is helping our students right now? Or are we putting an impossible amount of pressure on our teachers and on our students that this pandemic is almost highlighting as, you know, really problematic? So those are the things that we talk about, and just thinking about the way we speak about public education, the way politicians speak about public education, and we're just, you know, really you know, cheering for our public schools, our teachers, you all, our students, and we honor you so much. And it's been a real privilege to be part of this with you all. And thank you, Michael, and everybody.
Yeah. Jameson and Amanda's chapter, and you used these words, Amanda. I was ready to use them if you didn't, but you talk about winners and losers in our education system. And what I was left with after reading your chapter is that we don't need to create more winners. We need to eliminate the idea that there are winners and losers in the first place, right? You know, and I think you make a great case for that in your chapter. And finally, Kimberly.
Hi. So, good morning. And oh my gosh, I'm like eating up every speaker. And I just got my book in and I'm so excited. And also, Mari, I'm fangirling you. I went to change so I can dress like you. I'm all over it. So thank you so much, Mike, for including me in this work. And I think like for so many teachers, we're just doing our thing every single day and our thing is massive. But you know, I'm a sped teacher and an English teacher and I'm all these things. And so my chapter is about like all of this other work that I also knew was vital around it all. And just like every other teacher and every other human being, our story doesn't start today. So the story of how my chapter came to be doesn't start this morning. It probably starts from high school. And whenever I talk about that, like I'm just thinking back and I'm listening to everybody's stories and how all of this comes together. But so neither of my parents graduated from high school with a diploma. And I knew that I wanted to be a teacher because I couldn't believe I had made it that far, right? So we all have like our reason. But whenever I tried to tell people, I want to be a teacher, like there was so much change in me, like there's a cycle that has been stopped in me. But I was discouraged. Like, so whenever people were like realized like, oh, this kid's gonna go to college, like this kid's gonna be different. I was completely discouraged. And I think a lot of our young people hear that, like, don't be a teacher. You're too smart to be a teacher. You could do so much more with your life. And that is so damaging and so toxic. So fast forwarding, I actually became a social worker, which no one discouraged. And that's also beautiful work. And I think that it's really funny whenever people talk about how patient teachers are. I'm not patient at all. Like I couldn't wait any longer for the world to change. So I actually found a classroom because I realized that that's where that for me, change can happen and impact can happen a lot faster than I can make it happen without a classroom in a future generation. So over the years, I started to coach a lot of teachers and work with them. And I realized, number one, that obviously for a very long time, I might be the only Black teacher, like anywhere to be found. I realized that in that experience, a lot of like extra struggles were compounding by being maybe one of few Black people in a community of education. And I also realized that there was no way to really infuse a pipeline if no one wants to be a teacher, if everybody's continually discouraged from that path. And I also realized from coaching teachers that a lot of times what I was coaching them on are things that college doesn't teach. I'm almost teaching them how to just be ready for the learners and the reality in front of them, how to be ready for learners who need their identity brought to the forefront, how to be ready to leave your bias or recognize that you have it, how to leave that outside. How are you ready to really propel the 21st century like forward with children and seeing them as solutions and not problems? And so I realized that like for the longest time, A, we weren't recruiting at all. And B, if we were going to recruit, we need to do it super intentionally because it seems like education's one big game of retrofit. So what if we had it to do where we could like build how it should be from the ground up? And so over the past few years, like kind of looking into all the work around grow your own programs, I knew that in Louisiana, like I really wanted to be a part of something where we would change that from the offset. Like, what if we actually looked in our schools and our communities and we recruited for diversity and we recruited for the incredible talent and light and forces of nature that great teachers become, right? Like, what if we started that way? We know that, you know, it takes years to be a good teacher. So why don't we just start sooner? So my chapter is about sort of that essence, like how do we do two things? One, elevate the profession where we can really attract and like dig in and bring out the very best, like those students that have a 4.0 in humanity, not a 4.0 in physics. And then the other part, how do we make sure that we're intentional about that and bring all these other pieces around because we can't do one without the other. And so well, this entire thing, it's so amazing because we started this work together on this book well before the events of this summer. But I speak a lot to Gen Z and the research that I'd done about this incredibly special generation that we've got in front of us because they are our moment. They were built by their own design and their own stories and their own identity of who they are now to do this work of education and to do this work with us as teachers. So throughout this chapter, it's just really about looking around you and realizing that we don't have to wait to be a part of the change. Like our future is right there in our classroom and we just have to tell them like, this is you, this is your time. We need you. So I think that that book is about like putting all that pieces together. And then this particular chapter within the book is like making sure that this generation knows that this is what all of our work is. It was never just that one thing with a student in a classroom. It's a force and it's this global team moving us all forward together.
Yeah, you mentioned Gen Z, and you mentioned how you talk about them in your chapter, and the research that shows that that generation wants change more than any generation that's come before them. And I can't tell you how many times I've thought of that in the last week when I see the early voting numbers and how much young people are voting. Right, they are demanding to be a part of that change. And you know, and if they want change that badly, there's no better way to do it than to be a teacher, right? Which is the case that you make in your chapter. So before we get to game time, there's a couple of announcements that I probably should have made sooner, but I got so engaged in the conversations, I was excited. We are talking about Flip the System US, how teachers can transform education and save democracy. It did launch yesterday. It's available now. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it. What I love, someone tweeted out yesterday, I want to buy it, but I'm only buying it from an independent bookseller. So, hey, look. I love that. So yes, if you rather order it through your independent local bookseller, go to them and ask to order it through them. I think that's awesome. Support your local businesses, especially that are owned by non-white, non-straight people. Support your local bookstores. In addition, we have a free book club. bit.ly FTSUS-book club. First 30 people. I know people have been asking, like, hey, we want to get together and discuss this work with people from different areas. We're going to have 30 people from all over the country, all over the world. If people want to register internationally, we're going to bring you together and have 5 different sessions where we talk about different sections of the book, and some of these wonderful chapter authors and contributors that you've been talking to hopefully will join in and talk about their chapters as part of that. I'm looking forward to that. I just think it's going to be some amazing conversation. Also, if you want to order the book through Routledge directly, they have given us a 20% discount code. If you've gotten your book already, that's okay. You can use this discount code to get any book on their website. So that code is IRK69. So if you type that in on routledge.com, you can get 20% off any book. And what I would say is, if you've already bought Flip the System US, use that discount code to get some of the previous Flip the System books. Those are all Routledge books, because those books are equally as incredible and inspired this work that we're talking about today. So with all of that out of the way, are you ready to play some match game? All right, I see the excitement. So we need to choose 2 people who are going to be our celebrities that are going to get matched to. So I have chosen by random in advance, Michael and Mari. You are going to be the 2 celebrities that are being matched to. So get your pads ready. The way that this works, if you've never seen the match game, is I am going to give a hypothetical question with a blank. Mari and Michael are going to fill in the blank with their best answer. And then the rest of you are going to write down an answer to see if you can match them. You can get up to 1 or 2 points depending on how it works. We're adapting the rules a little bit. And at the end, we are going to give away 3 prizes for the 3 people that have the most matches. So does everyone have a paper and pencil ready? I see Michael went to go get one. And by the way, I've used your names in these examples, but don't take it. I chose your names at random, right? So we'll see. All right, so the first fill in the blank. Mrs. Jensen was so frustrated. Actually, I should say Dr. Jensen was so frustrated. You can tell I wrote this before yesterday. The latest email from her principal said that she now had to blank before each lesson. Okay, so you've got to fill in the blank. Dr. Jensen was so frustrated. The latest email from her principal said that she now had to blank before each lesson. Okay, so everyone write down your answers and we'll see if you can match Mari and Michael's.
Why did I get picked for this?
It was random.
Oh my God, someone give me a word.
Well, I'll read it one more time. And really, there's no right answer, right? I mean, you just put in whatever and we'll see if anyone's going to match it. Have some fun with it. Dr. Jensen was so frustrated, her latest email from her principal said that she now had to blank before each lesson. Oh, don't show yet. Don't show yet, Winter. Okay, so Michael and Mari, give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Mari's flustered. Choose anything.
I'm like blanking. I'm completely blanking. The pressure. It's too much.
All right, Michael, do you have something? Okay, Michael's good. So what did Dr. Jensen have to do before each lesson?
I'm just going to apologize to Dr. Jensen now for writing what I wrote.
Oh, don't worry.
I literally have nothing. Can I call in a friend? Dr. Jensen, can you call it? I'm calling in a friend. Dr.
Likewise.
Jensen.
All right. So do you want to try and match to Lindsay on this one? That's fine. We can do that. All right.
Thank you. I can't come up with anything.
All right. So Lindsay and Michael, hold up your answers. Let's see what you got.
Meditate.
So her principal told her she had to meditate before each class and dance the Dougie. All right. So Winter, what did you have? Did you match either of those answers? Dance. We're going to count that. That is a point. Yes. Point for Winter. All right. Beth, what'd you have? Do a jig. We'll also count that. Wow, you guys are awesome at this. Okay, so point for Winter, point for Beth. Okay, Ginny. Nothing? Wah, wah, wah. No.
Ginny matched me.
Was mad. I was trying to take it seriously, so I just said identify standards met.
Okay, that's a fantastic answer. Totally wrong, but fantastic. That was great.
That's my life.
So I was thinking, like, sanitize all of the seats or something, right? Amanda, what did you have? Nothing. Okay, and Kimberly.
Like, who would be upset about being forced to dance before teaching? I went with gargle.
Gargle. All right. Yeah. Great answer, but unfortunately, no points. All right. So Winter and Beth are in the lead with 1 point each. All right. Second example. So Michael, here we go. Here's Lindsay's chance to get retribution here. So for Halloween, Mr. Pena got in trouble for wearing blank to school. So for Halloween, Mr. Pena got into trouble for wearing blank to school. Got this one, Maury? I see a nod. We're feeling more confident about this one, right? All right, give me a thumbs up if you have an answer. Good. All right, so Maury, what'd you write?
I went with what I think we need to talk about because he wore a dress to school.
You wore a dress to school. Okay, so you got into trouble, wrongfully so. That's good. Okay, Michael, what did you get in trouble for wearing to school?
Underoos.
Underoos. All right. So let's see if we have any matches. Kimberly, did you have a match? Pants. No. Good guess, but no. Amanda.
A teaching is political shirt.
Oh, excellent. Great guess, but no, it was underoos. Beth? Yep. Beth had a candidate. Yes. Ginny? Balloons. No. Yeah. Kimberly, nice try, but we're not giving you a point for that. You can't change your answer afterwards. Dr. Jensen? A hat. Okay. And Winter? A tie. No. So no matches, no points in that round. All right. That's okay. I would imagine that there's probably going to be a lot of rounds when we have no points. Round number 3. Okay. So Kimberly, your time to be in the chopping block here. So during virtual parent-teacher conferences, Mrs. Eckert was mortified that parents saw blank behind her on the video. During virtual parent-teacher conferences, Mrs. Eckert was mortified that parents saw what behind her on the video?
I'm trying, what would it take to mortify me?
It would be behind you though, right? So it's like what's on the screen
behind you, yes,
wall
yeah.
Behind you the parents are looking at?
Right.
Or someone in the background, right?
Could be anything in the background.
Okay.
All right. Michael.
All right. And everybody should be able to get this point. It's like the only thing I think that would mortify me, but it really wouldn't. I would just laugh. Sorry. But nude rig dog.
Okay. There we go. All right. So now you only get a point though if you matched Mari or Michael though. Right. So Michael or Mari have that? No. Amanda, what a Confederate flag? Okay.
Mine was, it's too small to read. Her Chachi loves Joni poster.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic. Great answer. Phenomenal answer. Amanda, were you able to match any of those?
I mean, I was still working on it. I had something in my head about a pet doing something just embarrassing, but I couldn't come up. I don't know
Okay.
if
All right.
Rich
Yeah,
saw it,
sure.
so.
All right, Beth.
I went very Kim specific.
Nice. World of
World of
That would not mortify me.
Lindsay, what do you
Me?
Yep.
I had her bottles of wine.
have? Okay. All right. Could be. And Winter. Her hubby and his undies. There you go. All right. So I am actually going to, because 3 of you matched, I'm going to give you points for that. We're going to go ahead and, so that's Ginny. Winter gets a second point, right? And since you matched them. All right. We're adapting the rules on the fly because I'm the game show host and I can do that, right? So right now, Winter's leading with 2. Beth, Ginny, and Kimberly all have 1.
So Mike, are you actually flipping the system on the game?
Sure. Here we go. Or just throwing out the rules. I don't know. All right. We got time for 2 more questions. So, when Mrs. Cooper saw the itinerary for the latest Teacher Professional Development Day, she couldn't believe that it included what? So when Mrs. Cooper saw the itinerary for the latest Teacher Professional Development Day, she couldn't believe that it included what? Okay, let me know if you've got an answer. Good. All right, Michael, what we got? Schoology. Oh, great answer. Okay, Mari?
A match game.
What's that?
A match game.
A match game. Even better answer. Great. Okay. So, Winter, what'd you have? SEL via Zoom. All right. Ironic and terrible. Yes. Great answer. Dr. Jensen.
I had assessment.
Assessment. Yes. Beth.
I chose to think positively, an excerpt from Flip the System.
That would be awesome. Yes. All of you administrators out there planning professional development days. Yes. That's what we're looking for. Ginny. Schoology training. All right. So there's a point. Okay. Ginny tied for the lead. Amanda. Nothing? No. Kimberly.
It's only during match game that I wish I had a more typical brain.
A crawfish boil. That, you know,
not unheard of in Louisiana.
I'll tell you, if I went to a professional development day and it had a flip the system conversation, that would be awesome. But a crawfish boil would be right there with it. That is pretty awesome.
That would be the one that I would want to go to.
Yeah, me too. Hey, you can
Pleasant surprise.
administrators out there, you can do both at the same time. Those are not mutually exclusive. All
Food
right.
is always good at a PD. Always.
That's right, especially if it's a crawfish boil. All right, last question. Last question. And we do have a tie right now. Winter and Ginny are tied for first. Okay. While Ms. Powderton was walking to her class, she was surprised to see a skywriting plane write the slogan blank above her campus. While Ms. Powderton was walking to her class, she was surprised to see a skywriting plane write the slogan blank above her campus. Kim looks especially proud of her answer there. And while you're finishing up your answers, I'm actually spinning the wheel to see who you're playing for. Okay. All right, are we ready? Mari, what do you have?
Mine is for Dr. Lindsay. It says free wine for teachers.
Free wine for teachers. Yes. That would be an awesome slogan. Michael, what'd you have?
Mine fits the idea of my chapter.
Black Lives Matter. Good. Okay. All right. So Amanda, we're going to start with you. What were you shocked to see written in sky?
I'm gonna say it's because it's Saturday, but I'm just not thinking fast enough. So
Oh, that's okay. No worries. No worries.
But I'm going with the Black Lives Matter one, but don't give me a point for that.
Okay, good. All right. Kimberly, well, you were smiling right now. You wrote it down. You couldn't wait. What'd you have there?
That was smug.
Flip the system. Yes. Good. All right, Ginny.
Had something to do with politics, but I just recently transitioned to the DOE, so I'm not going to show it.
Okay, good. All right. Smart. I don't want anyone getting fired because of the Flip the System book launch event. So that's good. Beth. Black Lives Matter. That's a point. Excellent. All right. Lindsay.
I went with sarcasm, and I was political, and well, I might get fired for it. I don't know. I went with a Betsy DeVos for president and a sad face.
Okay. Yes, that would be shocking. I think
Very.
Everybody to see written in the sky. Yes. And Winter. Black Lives Matter. Point. All right. So Winter, you are the Flip the System book launch event match game winner. Woohoo! Awesome sauce. And you have won. Let me look at the prizes. I've got them written here. You have written you've won a signed copy of Flip the System US for Tracy in Pennsylvania. Okay, so good job.
I know Tracy. She's gonna be so excited.
All right, and so we have a tie for second place. Beth and Ginny. So we have to do a tiebreaker to see who second place is. So this is just for Beth and Ginny. Okay, and you have to match me. We'll see. I'm gonna write down an answer here. Okay, so let's see if you can match me. And we've got, after a week of hybrid teaching, Ms. Davies celebrated the weekend with blank on Friday evening. Okay, so after a week of hybrid teaching, Ms. Davies celebrated the weekend with blank on Friday evening. And remember, you have to match me.
Not Lindsay.
Right. Okay. So, Beth, what'd you have?
I decided to go with a piece of reality. This is how I celebrated the end of my first week of hybrid teaching.
A positive COVID test. Oh, well, that's a terrible answer. I'm glad I didn't write that, but I'm also disappointed that you didn't get a point. Ginny, what do you have? Bourbon. Awesome. Oh, I totally should have gone with that answer, but I went with karaoke. Karaoke. But I think bourbon is a phenomenal answer, so we're going to give Ginny that point there. Okay.
And also,
You're not going to give the point to the person who has a positive COVID test, Michael. Like you're really not.
Empathy. You should give
Like
it.
I'm done. I pull myself out of the competition.
I mean, but between the two, I mean, wouldn't we rather have bourbon than a positive COVID test? I mean, I don't.
Yeah, but I love my
sympathy point for you, Beth.
I mean, I just don't want to celebrate the positive COVID test, but that's fine.
I want to point out that I clapped because I thought it read negative, meaning I've known Beth has had this, and so then I look like the jerk clapping for COVID.
So here's what I'm going to do, because I'm going to model what we preach. I am going to allow for democracy, and we're going to flip the system, and we are going to allow Beth to have that point, right? Because we don't want this to be a top-down hierarchy here on the flip the system call. So Beth, you have finished second, and you have won for Diane in Kansas a Flip the System t-shirt. And in third place, Ginny, you have won a Flip the System face mask for Andy in Massachusetts. So good job, everyone. So I hope that you had some fun. I certainly did. That was a good time. Just being able to spend time with all of you on a call and have some fun with it is great. But more importantly, shifting back to the serious nature of the work that you've put together. I just can't wait, as I've said many times, I can't wait for people to read your chapters, both because I think they're brilliant and I think they bring forth really important perspectives, but also because I truly believe in my heart that your work is going to make a difference, that it's going to start changing, shifting perspectives, shifting ideas, that it's going to start moving our education systems, plural, because in the United States, we are made up of many different local and statewide education systems. I think that as people read your work, it is so emotional, so connected to reality, so research driven, that people are going to be forced to have to change how they think about education. And when that happens, the ultimate result is going to be that our education system is going to be better for our kids, better for students, more inclusive, more equitable, and is going to lead to a democracy that is stronger, that eliminates some of the problems that we're seeing now, some of the divisiveness, some of the inability for people to talk across battle lines, whatever those battle lines happen to be. And so thank you for letting me come along on this ride with all of you. Thank you for letting me, for giving me chapters that were so amazing to edit, and for inspiring me for the last 18 months. I have gotten, each time I got a chapter, I got to go through it and live that with you, and go through that process of editing and making sure that your voice was heard. And that was just incredibly special for me. So thank you for all that you did. I don't know what else I can say. It's just been an amazing process for me, and I'm so proud that we're finally here.
Michael, I'm not going to let you get off the hook here. Michael Soskil brings people together, and he is just an example of how good leadership multiplies. And he has been instrumental not only in mine, but I know everyone's teacher leadership journey. So snaps for you, buddy. You rock.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's just an honor and a pleasure to do the work with all of you. And as much as, I mean, I try and give back because I've learned those same things that you're talking about from so many others. We're all blessed to be in these networks of inspiration with other people. And, you know, we have a responsibility to give back in any way that we can do that. I know that all of you are with me, that we try and do that in any way that we can. So before we go, we're almost out of time. I just want to shout out one more time. You can get your copy of Flip the System US, How Teachers Can Transform Education. Demand it from your local bookseller. You can get it on Amazon. If you want to order through Routledge and you haven't gotten your copy yet, there is a discount code. Routledge.com, you can go, and the code is IRK69. So make sure you go ahead and use that if you want 20% off. If you've already bought your Flip the System US book, go ahead and buy one of the previous Flip the System books with that code. You can get 20% off any book on Routledge's website, but I would recommend those other 3 Flip the System books. In addition,
copy for a friend.
yes, or buy one for a friend, even better. I love it. Or both, right? Do all that. You can get 20% off all those books. I think they might actually have a discount going right now, if they're still running it, where if you buy more than one book, you get 25% off. So that would be great. And I don't think you even need a code for that. But also, if you're interested in joining us for a book club, a free book club, we're going to be running 5 different 1-hour sessions over Zoom. Where we're going to be speaking with me and some of the other chapter authors in the book. It's bit.ly/FTSUS for Flip the System US-book club. That's available to you. And also make sure you follow all of the authors on social media, because in addition to the chapters they're writing, they're also doing incredible work in other ways. You can find most of them on Twitter and Facebook. So I would encourage you to reach out, not just to the 8 chapter authors on this call, but also to all of the authors in the book. And that being said, my friends, we have run out of time, but thank you for spending some time with me this morning. Thank you for being part of this project, and let's see where it leads us, because I think great things are coming.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Love you all.
Thanks, Mike. Great to see everyone.
Have a great Saturday.
Be blessed.